Hello and welcome to the Deliberate Leaders Podcast. I am Katie Carpenter, Executive Health and Wellness Coach here at Deliberate Directions. So today's podcast is about bridging the gap between business and mindfulness. Our guest today is Max Schneider. Max spent a decade in the consulting industry where he found himself feeling burnout, struggling with anxiety, and feeling depleted. He sought solace in a transformative surf and yoga trip to Costa Rica with his wife. And this experience provided Max the space to slow down and focus on himself in a way he hadn't in a long time, sparking a mission to provide similar rejuvenation to other high-achieving professionals. Max's story is one of profound transformation. His approach is grounded in the belief that investing in the well-being of individuals ultimately leads to the greater organizational success. So after experiencing burnout firsthand, he took a leap of faith and embarked on a journey to Costa Rica, where the idea for sand and salt escapes, was born. His background is in Max?
Yes.
You just cut out there. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're gonna just keep recording because we can
Okay.
splice this
Yeah,
in.
that sounds good.
You're back, so
I'm here.
okay. After experiencing burnout firsthand, he took a leap of faith and embarked on a journey to Costa Rica, where the idea for sand and salt escapes was born. His background in consulting, coupled with a deep commitment to mindfulness, has allowed him to curate transformative experiences for individuals and organizations across the nation. Max focuses on providing high-achieving professionals with the space and support they need to prioritize their well-being through immersive retreats and offsites. Max helps participants unwind, reconnect with themselves, and find synergy with their peers in settings beyond the ordinary. That sounds amazing. Welcome to the podcast, Max. Would you
Thanks
take,
so thanks so much for
yeah,
having me, Katie.
you bet. Would you take a minute and please share a little bit about yourself and your journey to Sand and Salt Escapes?
Thank you. Yeah, and it was born out of, as you mentioned, my own experience where I like a lot of people listening to this, just commit 100% to everything that I do. And that became a bit of a challenge for me when I didn't understand how to really balance out that intensity and that commitment with the idea of rest. And when you continue to push and you continue to push and you continue to push, you eventually hit that point that it does break. So yeah, I mean, between getting shingles, having anxiety attacks at airports, on calls, and just really feeling like a shell of a human being, I realized I had totally lost touch with who I was. So, but what I also recognize is that people, like, this isn't a unique experience, unfortunately. So many people in particularly the corporate world have these ebbs and flows to their careers and their lives where you lose a little bit of touch with who you are. So what I wanted to do was help people, maybe not like catch them before they got to the point that I was at, curled up in a ball in my living room. Not sure if I was having a heart attack or what was going on.
Yeah.
And the tools that we use for that are movement, mindfulness, and conversation. So that's been a very meaningful journey for me, just to be able to get back and kind of bring something that I think is so missing in the corporate world and really just help people see themselves as human beings rather than as titles and learn how to take care of themselves in this world that is 24/7, with inundation of pressure, obligations, and everything else that we experience on a day-to-day basis.
Gosh, I love that so much. Did you say, I want to repeat that, movement, mindfulness, and conversation?
Yes, those are
Like,
the three pillars of everything that we do.
yeah, that's beautiful. I think when you talk about rest and receiving through rest is just, I mean, it's the truth about how to receive from all your work is you have to slow down and rest for a moment to receive from all that doing, right? So
Absolutely.
when people start to settle into rest a little bit, this topic comes up about like, oh, it's kind of boring. And tell me a little bit about what have we been taught about boredom and why is it an enemy?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we have this perception that like boredom is the enemy. everything in our day-to-day lives just teaches us to not be bored, whether we can pull out of our phone, we got a 5 minute break and just pull out Instagram, we scroll Instagram. We've got podcasts that we can listen to on the walk to or the drive to and from work. We have TV that's always on. We just are always engaging our brain in some way, shape, or form. And the brain does need rest. We're taught that, I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say something like, oh, I don't want to be alone with my own thoughts? Like, that's what we need, though, to
Yeah.
connect with ourselves, to slow down and actually understand the way that we're experiencing life. There's a lot of ways that you can start integrating like, intentional rest and boredom into your life. And it does take a little bit of work and a little bit of effort, but anything that's meaningful doesn't come easy. Things do take work. And for a lot of us, it actually is work to not do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think that you just described a process of allowing that boredom, quote unquote, to be this process of exploring ourselves and what those thoughts are and that thought process about things and about our relationships. So I like,
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful process. It's the a process of getting to know who we are, a process of getting to listen to our bodies, a process of getting to observe our thoughts, a process of getting to understand our emotions and where they come from. But by doing that kind of work and allowing that boredom to surface and that exploration, we find ourselves in a place where we're no longer just reacting to things, but we're actually consciously responding. And that's a massive shift that I think is very challenging thing for a lot of us to make.
yeah, yeah. And we have to slow down to do that consciously, right? Yeah. So, since we are talking about leadership here and leaders within this and these companies, what are companies getting right? Because we talk so much about what they're getting wrong and how we need to do it better, but what are we getting right about the way that we take care of our employees?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that organizations are doing that are starting to move in the right direction there. COVID just shifted our relationship with work entirely. And I think in a couple of different ways. One, it made us realize how much of our time we actually spend on work. And two, because it started bleeding into every element of our life when we just are working from home constantly. It was just like this space that it started to take over, and you become much more aware of that. You can't escape it. It's just all there at home. And two, I think we also started to get a much better appreciation of how to take care of ourselves as individuals. And when you take those two things together and realize that we're spending 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week at work, and at the same time, we need to take care of ourselves differently, there, I think, became this expectation from employees looking up at leadership and looking up at their organizations and saying, how are you going to help me not take care of myself and develop just as a professional, but also as an individual? So I think there's a lot of things that some companies are doing right in that way where, I mean, you're seeing things like gym memberships, discounted gym
Yeah.
memberships, healthier food in the kitchens. But a lot of that stuff's becoming table stakes, frankly, and it's not really shifting a lot of behavior. You're helping the people who are already going to have a gym membership just get a discounted gym membership. The people who wanted to eat healthier food, like they're already going to do it. They're just going to eat the stuff that's in the kitchen instead.
Yeah.
And I think that there's like this shift that's starting to make, and there's a lot of organizations that are at the leading edge of this, of understanding that there's a lot of other tools out there to help people take care of themselves. I know, for example, you've got familiarity with like breath work. Breath work is an amazing tool for us to be able to actually like in very intentionally change our CO2 and O2 levels, feed ourselves in a different way, move the energy in our body in a different way that can open up a lot. And you're seeing organizations like Google, for example, out of like their Chelsea office, they are offering breath work. And so you're starting to see some organizations moving in this direction of providing like true meaningful experiences that are going to help like unlock and shift things in people rather than just rewarding individuals who are already doing things that are taking care of themselves.
Yeah. They're rewarding them for or facilitating rather that rest, that permission to take this rest, to slow down. It's not about what you do, it's about being more, right? Instead of doing more.
Yeah,
Which,
and even getting to the point where you realize like, oh, just turning on Netflix and sitting on the couch in the evening, that's not rest. That's like you're physically resting your body, but mentally you're getting inundated with imagery, you're getting inundated with different concepts, like your brain's still thinking about these things,
Yeah.
and you're not actually turning off. So yeah, you're starting to, I think, see some organizations that are like, understanding the role that they have within the lives of their employees and making investments to help them learn how to take care of themselves as people, which then in turn helps also productivity in the way they show up in work and the way that they're engaged in nutrition within organizations.
Yes. I was just going to ask you about how do we measure that ROI on mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
What are they kind of getting back, and what is this doing to cultivate a more capacity and quality of a person and of those employees, and then a culture, right?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
It is, yeah. And I think from a cultural perspective too, like those types of behaviors, and you mentioned giving people permission to rest, that starts at the top. When you
Yes.
have executives who are not modeling that behavior, that's the first place that we have to start with this, which is why a lot of our work that we do in the corporate space is working with executive teams. Because I mean, we've all been there before as individual contributors or as mid-level managers. We're trying to make change or trying to like shift things, but everybody's looking up and going, well, the top of the house isn't doing anything about this. Like they're modeling the opposite behavior. So like, how are we actually supposed to create space for this? So
Yeah.
that element of it, of like starting at the top of the house, working with the executives, um, and them modeling that behavior, I think is what gives the permission that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So people can take care of themselves.
Yeah. And like as part of your, what you described in the beginning is conversation, just having that conversation is we don't even realize sometimes that people are waiting for permission, right? And just over communicating in a way where it's like, let's talk about this and
Mhm.
communicate about what's allowed and what you might not consciously be wanting permission for, but you have it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what's the impact that it has on you and your manager who's on vacation is sending emails at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. And you're seeing that, like, that's not even like a subconscious thing that's being communicated. That's a very conscious thing that you realize, like, okay, well, when I'm on vacation, am I expected to show up in the same way and still be connected, or can I actually have that downtime? But yeah, you talk about the communication happens so either overtly or sometimes through maybe behaviors that are well intentioned because they want to help keep the team moving, but at the same time, like, there is a whole other side to that behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good question I want to ask you then. Let's put this out there is like, how can leaders create change at the team and individual levels, right? Let's give some examples of if they're like looking or grasping at things that they can integrate. What are some good examples?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is we first have to learn how to lead ourselves in this work. And until we have a grasp of that and what that looks like for us as an individual, for us as a leader within an organization, that's where the work begins. So that requires first just a really strong look in the mirror and understanding more about like your daily rhythms. How are you building in rest on more of like a longer term, on a yearly basis? What are you doing to protect that time? What are the different mindfulness habits that you have? What are the different things from like an exercise perspective, from a nutrition perspective? How are you taking care of yourself? And that's the place that it has to start first. But when we work with organizations that are doing this well and who have leaders who are doing those types of things, what client that we worked with last year, we're working with again this year. They're called Thatium. They are a consultancy based in Chicago, and they have set up like wellness study groups where they get it like during work hours, they protect time for these small groups to be able to get together, and they have kind of like a wellness wheel where they're talking about different areas within that and using that as a space to be able to like have conversations about life and connect with each other as human beings. But that's one really awesome example of an organization that we know firsthand is like actually dedicating work hours to this, which I think then continues to give that permission for people to like show up as themselves and be
Yeah.
themselves.
So authentically, it gives people that space to show up authentically, right? Is
Mhm.
you are more than like what you do at work, right? You. There's depth to that and authenticity. And when authenticity is welcomed, oh man, it changes everything.
It does. Yeah, and that's I love what you're saying there because like at the core of everything we do, we're human beings. We layer on these other titles. We layer
Yes.
on like whether it's senior vice president, whether that's our role in our family as like a parent or a sibling, as a partner, whether that's our role in the community. We look at ourselves oftentimes through this role or this lens of what are my titles? But all of those titles are just getting layered onto who you are as a human being. So when we're talking about getting in touch with ourselves and like, understanding who we are, we have to set away all of those external things and first take a look inside and spend some time exploring and discovering who we are as human beings.
Yep. Taking time for that rest or that boredom, as you would say, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sitting with that. Well, how do your retreats facilitate that for professionals and teams?
Yeah. So the very first thing on that front is we take care of everything for individuals, for teams, so that they can just show up and not worry about something. Because every time there's an offsite, like there's so many logistics that you have to plan for. There's all of these things. So we have a team who manages all of that. Same thing for when we run retreats for individuals. Like from the
Mhm.
moment you book to the moment you leave, we will take care of everything for you. So you don't have to think about anything besides yourself. And then we incorporate in movement, mindfulness, and conversation. So depending upon if it's an offsite, depending upon the team's kind of needs, we tailor everything. So we might do different forms of movement, whether we're in Costa Rica, whether we're in the States and somewhere like Palm Springs, we take advantage, get outside, whether that's like surfing, whether that's hiking, whether that's more exercise classes, and helping people understand more about the relationship with their body. And then the afternoons, we do mindfulness classes. So we do things like breath work, things like sound bath, things like yoga, things like meditation, painting, just mindful activities that oftentimes people haven't tried before. And there's so much value in that newness and getting to explore yourself in a different way than usual. And we also facilitate conversations. So again, depending upon the group, depending upon kind of the needs and what's surfacing, we always tailor those conversations differently. We have a lot of facilitated activities that help people, one, just understand mindfulness, and then two, be able to slow down and connect with themselves through some deeper reflection and connect with their colleagues and others in a very deep and meaningful way that continues well beyond the retreats and the offsites. And we do it all at stunning locations, like gorgeous, gorgeous villas and estates in Palm Springs and in Nosara, Costa Rica.
That just sounds amazing and like such important work. What you facilitate is such important work. It's just helping people kind of feel safe in those spaces or just letting go a little enough to settle in. So I have a question for you. I have two questions for you. So if there are some leaders listening to this right now, what would be their number one takeaway that you would want them to understand more deeply and take away from today in this conversation?
Yes. The ability to lead and understand yourself is paramount before showing up and doing that for others. Especially when we were talking about things related to well-being, there's no getting around that. People will see right through the BS if you're trying to do it without having spent some time working on yourself first. And then like to the word you used before with authenticity, like, it's a pretty tough way to lead when people don't view you through that lens. So that is the most important thing is how understanding how are you taking care of yourself and prioritizing you and your own rest before you show up and try to lead your team in that regard.
So important, so important. And then I guess this is actually the same thing, but do you have anything to add as far as leadership tips, like the one leadership tip? Because you are a business owner and you had the courage to kind of step out of your usual industry that knew and were an expert in and created like this whole new industry for yourself or career. And what would you say is the biggest leadership takeaway for you in that process?
The biggest thing for me has been learning how to listen to the business and let the business tell me what it needs to be. So I think it's actually really parallel to mindfulness, where within mindfulness or meditation, you're going to learn that you experience the world through your body. Your mind interprets it, but the body is the vehicle through which we experience the world. And if we slow down and learn how to listen to it, we can learn a lot about life. And the same thing applies to running a business, where we experience being an entrepreneur, being a leader through the business. So for me, that ability to slow down and listen to the business and not just jam what I think that it should be, but pay attention to what are our clients saying, what are our guests saying, how are the financials shifting, and just really listening to the business has been one of the most impactful and influential mindsets that I've had that's allowed us to have the success we've had up to this point.
Max, that's incredible. That is actually very revealing, that answer as to you are an expert in your field and that you integrated mindfulness into all that you do, including business, which is admirable. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. So will you tell me really quick, where can people find out more about you and your immersive retreats and offsites that you offer?
Yes, you can go to sandandsaltescapes.com. That's our website. We have a lot of information about retreats and the offsites that we run for executive and intact teams. You can also reach out to me directly. My name is Max, so my email is max@sandandsaltescapes.com.
Okay, thank you so much, Max. It was great talking with you today.
Thank you for having me, Katie. I appreciate it.